Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. And today we're going to continue talking about our featured work of literature, Go Ask Alice. This is a diary kind of book. That was written by a young girl, but we don't really know if it's a work of fiction or nonfiction. Things seem to indicate that it was a work of fiction by this one woman
Beatrice
here.
Sparks.
Yeah, I knew Beatrice. I couldn't think of her last name there.
Sparks, yeah.
Though it could still be considered kind of true because she worked at a mental hospital in Utah, and so she probably knows about what these kids were going through back in the time.
She probably heard a lot of stories because if you're in a mental hospital, you probably want to share, what's troubling you. She was a music therapist. She would take her guitar and sing some songs to those patients to try to calm them down and make them feel better.
Or maybe play the flute. A flute can be nice and sweet sounding too.
True enough. I like the flute. Or maybe she just played the drums. We don't know.
I don't think you want to play the trumpet to some mentally disturbed people. It might drive them crazy.
Yeah. And I was thinking violin, but I thought, you have to be really good not to squeak on the violin. So, yeah, we're gonna go with flute and guitar and singing.
Okay, very good. But yes, indeed, she was a music therapist, and she wrote this book, or supposedly wrote this book. But again, as we said, we don't really know if she wrote it or not. And it did kind of have a sad ending here. The woman in the novel, speaking in the first person, was trying drugs and trying to come clean, but eventually she died of an overdose. And we don't really understand the circumstances of that. So, yeah, it's kind of a depressing book. But,
well, you know what, Tom? One of the things that's really important for people who are addicted to drugs, if they try to get off them, they have to find a new group of friends. Because if you hang out with the friends who are on drugs or taking drugs, you'll never get clean. And so it's a really tough transition or change because, first of all, you're trying to get rid of the habit, but then you have to find a whole new circle of friends.
Indeed. Sometimes that might involve joining a church or something or moving to another town.
Moving
or
too, yeah.
Whatever. But let's continue talking about some of the themes in this book in today's lesson. Let's listen to today's lesson now one time.
Alice begins writing her diary for the same reason that many teenagers do. There is no one to talk to. A string of insignificant friendships and her inability to connect with her family leave her in desolation. She is constantly seeking someone that really gets her. It is not until her stint in the hospital that she learns ways of working through the initial discomfort of open communication. When she finally returns home to her family and Joel, she has come to terms with the fact that her interpersonal relationships are more real than the ones she creates while on drugs. Alice's connection to drugs is an attempt at forming the bonds she desires. The hippie counterculture of the 1960s promises her peace, ecstasy, and love. It seduces her into thinking that she can use drugs and sex to fulfill her need for closeness. When she can't find the intimate relationships she craves with her family and straight friends, she uses the hippie counterculture as an escape. In the end, though, she recognizes that it does little more than blur the lines between her fantasies and the reality of real connections. The problems Alice faces are not confined to the 1960s. Her insecurities are just as relevant to teenagers today. She, like many 15-year-olds, wants to grow up, though the familiar sense of childhood still lingers. She balances precariously between adulthood and childhood, consuming drugs and practicing casual sex, while constantly thinking about the safety and comfort of home. When she runs away, she is seeking independence, but her prodigal return represents a desperate cry for help. Her final trip home from the hospital sees her finally finding solace. Laying this bare in her final diary entry is her way of showing those who come after her that it's possible for them as well.
Okay, here's the third part of our literature unit. Again, we're talking about Go Ask Alice. It's a story of a troubled youth, a young person who's having difficulty growing up. Now, Alice begins writing her diary for the same reason that many teenagers do. There is no one to talk to. I don't know of many people out there who write diaries. I try to encourage my daughter to write a diary, not because there's no one to talk to, but because it can help her, sort out her feelings and work on her writing skills and stuff like that.
And you can be creative in your diary writing.
I certainly write a diary myself, just trying to log what happens every day.
Oh, you do? Really?
Observing life. I don't really call it a diary. I just call it my personal notes. But in any case here, Alice writes her diary because she wants to have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
It's so lonely out here. Nobody understands me. My parents are from the old generation. They don't understand what we're going through. But my friends, they don't understand me either. So I'm going to write in my diary as a way to sort things out.
Well, she has a string of insignificant friendships. A string of means a line of, one after another. Insignificant means too small, unimportant, not really worth anything, right? So she's got a lot of friendships, but they haven't been good friendships, valuable friends that she's made. And she has an inability to connect with her family. So these two things, a string of insignificant friendships and her inability to connect with family, have left her feeling desolate. That's the adjective form of this noun, desolation. We often talk about a place like a desert that has no plants or much greenery. It's kind of barren. No one's there, as being desolate. So if you are feeling desolation, you feel a lot of emptiness inside, you're very miserable, you're very lonely.
Yeah, for example, I could say there was nothing but destruction and desolation after the atomic bomb exploded on Hiroshima back in 1945. Well, she is constantly seeking someone that really gets her. Here, get just means understand.
Yeah.
Indeed. Hey, I just explained a bunch of stuff. Do you get it? Do you understand? So she wants someone to basically understand her, to relate to her. And it is not until her stint in the hospital that she learns ways of working through the initial discomfort of open communication. So she had a stint in the hospital. A stint means a period of time doing something. A lot of men, for example, will have a stint in the military.
Yeah.
A certain amount of time they need to serve in the Army or the Navy or whatever. And yes, indeed, she learned ways to work through this initial discomfort of open communication. Initial just means at the beginning. Well, initially I was kind of scared, but later on I got used to things, and now I like living here. And discomfort means you're not comfortable. I'm experiencing some discomfort in my back. Doctor, can you do something for me? And yes, in the hospital, I suppose they had to have open communication. Tell us about your feelings.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're thinking right now. She wasn't used to that.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but because she had to do it in the hospital, they have these group therapy sessions where all the patients will talk about their problems to really strangers, because the other patients aren't family members or friends. When she finally returns home from the hospital and comes home to her family and Joel, she has at that point come to terms with the fact that her interpersonal relationships are more real than the ones she creates while on drugs. That those friends and relationships that she's made while she's high on drugs are not valuable at all. So if you come to terms with something, guys, it's just a way to say you've accepted something, you understand it and accept it at the same time. Perhaps if you were a soldier and you were blown up by a bomb and you lost your leg, sometimes it takes a little while to come to terms with the loss of that leg or the loss of a limb. So she understands it, accepts it, and she now realizes that her relationships that she's formed while she was high are just worthless.
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult for a parent to come to terms with the fact that their child might have some kind of disability. Sometimes parents just don't accept it, and they don't know how to deal with it. So here, I guess she's realizing that interpersonal relationships are better than the ones she has with her drug buddies. They just take drugs and they don't really care about her at all. Now, Alice's connection to drugs is an attempt at forming the bonds she desires. So I guess in this sentence, it's basically telling us that she did use drugs as a way to form some bonds with people, okay? Lots of people do that. They find different ways to bond with other people. Sometimes it's difficult to find people you can relate to. If you have something in common, then maybe you can bond with those people. Maybe you like hiking or something. Get together with some other people. Join a hiking club, for example, and then you can form bonds with those people. They'll be friends for life.
Yeah, you just have to find some sort of hobby or activity that other people are enjoying, and you'll automatically have a group that you can bond with. For me, it was singing in high school and acting. I was in the theater club, or I sang with choir. So those are friends that you can form through that particular hobby. Now, the hippie counterculture of the 1960s, it promises her peace, ecstasy, and love. We're going into the present tense here because we're just going to talk about Alice at that time, that she was actually experiencing things. When you talk about peace, you know what that means. Ecstasy is this great sense of happiness, overwhelming feeling of joy and excitement. We'd all like that. A lot of people who run, who jog, especially long-distance runners, they talk about the high or the ecstasy of running. I've never felt that, thank you. And love is also wonderful, and we're all looking for these things. The problem is those particular feelings seduce her into thinking that she can use drugs and sex to fulfill her need for closeness. We use this word seduce commonly when we're talking about somebody trying to attract another person and get them to do something perhaps that they don't really want to do. When I see seduce, I always think of 诱惑 or tempt somebody to do something. And we often use it when we're talking about sex, actually. But if you're seduced into something, something's convinced you to change your way of looking at things. And it could be that friends talked her into it, or it could be that the drugs did.
Indeed. So she came to believe that taking drugs and hanging out with these people would bring her closeness. And to be fair, I think a lot of hippies did experience that closeness with each other. It doesn't always fail, but again, eventually the hippies had to put down the drugs and look for jobs and study hard.
Yeah, they realized they had to have some money.
Yeah, you can't just keep doing that stuff forever and get money from your parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, parents get tired of that.
True. And when she can't find the intimate relationships she craves with her family and straight friends, she uses the hippie counterculture as an escape. So, yes, you want to find intimacy with your friends. Intimacy could involve sexual relations with somebody, boys and girls getting together and being intimate with each other, but also intimate relationships means they're close to each other. They can chat with each other.
They can share secrets, right?
And they can trust each other, indeed. And, of course, she craves this intimacy. To crave something means you really want that. Of course, it's difficult for people who try to quit smoking because they always crave a cigarette. Oh, just one. I got to have one. I crave it so bad. And, of course, she uses the hippie counterculture as a way to escape the things that she can't get with her family and her regular, normal, straight friends. Okay, that brings us to the midway point here. Let's stop talking and listen now to our Chinese teacher.
Hello, 大家好，我是 Trevor， 欢迎收听 English Digest。今天为各位介绍的是 Unit 15的第3天课程。在今天的课文中，第一段说明这本小说的主角爱丽丝和许多青少年一样，因为没有可倾诉的对象而开始写日记。爱丽丝渴望被了解以及和亲友建立亲密的关系。首先，我们看到第一段的第2句 A string of insignificant friendships and her inability to connect with her family leave her in desolation. 一连串无足轻重的友谊及和家人谈不来，把爱丽丝置于孤寂之中。其中的 insignificant insignificant 在这里是举无轻重的意思。各位同学比较熟悉的应该是去掉字首 significant 这个单字。significant 是形容词， 意思是 having an important effect or influence， 相当重要的意思。和它字义相近的形容词有 vital， V-I-T-A-L。例如 It is vital that the government take environmental protection seriously。政府重视环境保护是极其重要的。Crucial， C-R-U-C-I-A-L， 有决定性的、重要的意思。例如 Danny played a crucial part in winning the game for our team。 丹尼在替我们队伍赢得比赛这部分扮演一个决定性的角色。最后 Critical， C-R-I-T-I-C-A-L， 可以解释为关键的意思。例如The agent found the bomb at a critical moment and stopped it from exploding。 那名探员在关键的时刻找到了那颗炸弹，并阻止它爆炸。接着我们看到第二段，本段说明爱丽丝和毒品之间的连结是她渴望和他人建立羁绊，同时利用嬉皮这种反文化来逃避现实。我们看到本段的第一句 Alice's connection to drugs is an attempt at forming the bonds she desires。爱丽丝吸毒是她尝试建立她所渴望的关系。Bond， B-O-N-D， 在这里解释为联系、关系。例如 Common enemies formed a bond between us。 共同的敌人在我们之间形成一道联系。Bond 也有债券的意思。例如 Government bonds are usually safe to invest in。 政府的债券通常是可以安全投资的。Bond 还有契约的意思。例如 My words is my bond， I will do what I promise to you。 我的话就像契约一样可靠，我承诺过你的，我就一定会做到。最后 bond 加上 s 也可以做枷锁、束缚的意思。例如 The wolf managed to struggle free from its bonds。 那匹狼设法挣脱了枷锁的束缚。
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue talking about Go Ask Alice. Okay, this is in no relation to Still Alice, that movie that came out last year starring Julianne Moore about someone who's got Alzheimer's disease.
True.
This is different, though. This is about a woman writing her diary, although, again, we don't know for sure that that is actually her name because that name is never actually used in the book itself because it's written in the first person. When you write in the first person, you don't always use your name.
No,
right?
You say I. Yeah.
I did this, and then they did this to me, etc. But in any case here, she was using the counterculture of the hippies and drugs as an escape from her family and friends. They just didn't understand her. They just didn't get her.
Yeah.
But in the end, though, she recognizes that it does little more than blur the lines between her fantasies and the reality of real connections. So she recognizes this. If you recognize something, that means you can identify something. You know it's there, and you admit that it's there. We can also use this about governments in the world admitting that a country is governed by a certain government. Like many countries in the world simply don't recognize the government of Taiwan because of political problems.
Okay, so let's look at the next part then. She recognizes that it does little more than blur the lines. If something blurs the lines, it kind of gets confusing on how you're defining things. For example, I have a boss that hired me to teach business writing, right? But he's now become a friend. So it's kind of blurred the line between boss and friend. We're sort of half and half. And it makes it hard sometimes when he has to, get mad at me.
Yeah, to blur just means to make something unclear, like blurry vision, for example.
Blurry photographs.
There you go.
Yeah.
They're not in focus. You can't really see what the people are or who they are. And yes, it blurs the lines. She can't really tell the difference between fantasies, the things she is imagining, and her real relationships or her real connections with people. Yeah, she can't really tell the difference. So basically it's saying that taking all those drugs isn't really doing anything for her.
Yeah, it's so true. Now, the problem Alice faces, or the problem, she faces several problems, doesn't she? The problems Alice faces are not confined to the 1960s. So they're not limited to the 1960s. If you are confined in a particular area, you're limited or restricted. Maybe you feel a little cramped. There's not enough room. Sometimes we'll confine criminals to prison for the rest of their lives. So, or maybe you were naughty as a child and your mom made you go to your room. She would confine you to your room for a couple of hours until you promised to behave. That's what confined means. But confined also means limited. So the problems Alice faces are not limited to the 1960s. Those problems in the 60s, we still experience many of them today.
Yeah, those problems continued on into the 70s and 80s, 90s, and the zeros and the tens, whatever you want to call those. And, her insecurities are just as relevant to teenagers today. Your insecurities means you're just not sure about things. You don't understand relationships with other people. You don't entirely trust them. You don't really understand yourself. So you're kind of insecure and you seek other things for a sense of security. Maybe people read a lot or they, join clubs and stuff like that because they are kind of insecure. And if something is relevant, that means it is important or it is connected, it's appropriate, it's something that you need to take into consideration.
Yeah. Well, Alice, like many 15-year-olds, she wants to grow up. Notice that the wants is conjugated for she. You're not going to conjugate for 15-year-olds. So she, like many 15-year-olds, you kind of want to say want, right? No.
Yeah, sounds like it should because 15-year-olds.
That's right, but our subject is she, not the 15-year-olds. She wants to grow up, though the familiar sense of childhood still lingers. If something lingers, it kind of stays behind. We'll often talk about how the scent of a perfume lingers after a person has left the room. They're not even there anymore, but you can still smell the cigarette maybe that they smoked or the perfume they were wearing. So she still feels that childhood, the feeling of childhood that she had. She balances precariously between adulthood and childhood. If something is precarious, you're in a dangerous situation. So she's balancing dangerously between adulthood and childhood. She's not quite an adult, but she's not a child either. And it makes things kind of dangerous and risky for her.
I don't think any of us really, truly, totally grow up. There's still a little bit of a child in all of us.
Especially the boys. Let's be honest. Boys like their toys until they die.
Yeah, and girls, they keep buying, clothes and stuff like that, so they never grow up either. Don't tell me girls aren't children.
I think we're a little bit more mature, yeah.
In some cases. But in any case here, she balances precariously between adulthood and childhood. Consuming drugs and practicing casual sex while constantly thinking about the safety and comfort of home. So she's still doing these things. She's still using or consuming drugs. Casual sex is just sex that happens pretty much anywhere, anytime. Although you do have to be kind of private about those things.
Well, who knows?
Basically, you don't wait until you're married to do it. You just do it and, you don't really
with anybody. You don't even care.
Kind of irresponsible there. You could catch some STDs or something. And she's
not a good way to live.
It's not. And she's always thinking about safety, of course, so that's kind of dangerous. But also she wants to have the comfort of home. Now, when she runs away, remember, she leaves her home, she is seeking independence. And independence means the state of being basically on your own and you're able to take care of yourself.
That's right. Now, her prodigal return refers to a story about the prodigal son in the Bible. He takes all the money that his dad gave him as an inheritance. He goes off and he spends it on nothing important. And then when he's broke and he's in trouble, he comes back to his dad and asks for forgiveness. Will you take me back? Well, her prodigal return, she returns home too after having kind of a crazy life as a young 15-year-old. world, and she wants to be accepted by her family. She's desperate, and it's kind of this cry for help at that point. Her final trip home from the hospital sees her finally landing solace. Solace is peace. You'll often see it in writing, especially in poems and songs.
And she lays this bare in her final diary entry. If something's laid bare, you just tell the truth. You don't beat around the bush. This is her way of showing those who come after her that it's possible for them as well. To come after means people who live later and have the same experience, and maybe they can learn a thing or two from her diary. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation. Our Chinese teacher would still like to talk to you now.
我们接着看到第二段的最后一句。In the end, though, she recognizes that it does little more than blur the lines between her fantasies and the reality of real connections. 然而，最后他认清这无异于模糊了幻想和现实关系真实性的界限。其中的动词 recognize, R-E-C-O-G-N-I-Z-E, 在这里解释为认清事实的意思。例如 Mandy recognized that she had made a terrible mistake by getting married. 曼蒂认清到她结婚是个严重的错误。Recognize 的名词为 recognition, R-E-C-O-G-N-I-T-I-O-N, 有两个相关的常见片语。第一个 beyond recognition, 无法辨识。例如 My friend Alex had changed beyond recognition since high school. 我的朋友艾利克斯自从高中之后变得让人认不出来。第二个 in recognition of, 表彰的意思。例如The soldier was given a medal in recognition of his bravery during the war. 那名士兵被授予一面奖牌，以表彰他在战场上英勇的表现。最后我们看到第三段，本段说明爱丽丝在1960年代面临的矛盾和困境，其实和现代青少年所要面对的没什么不同。身为一名青少年，爱丽丝想要长大独立，但同时又渴望家庭的安稳和温暖。本段的最后一句Laying this bare in her final diary entry is her way of showing those who come after her that it's possible for them as well. 把这些揭露在她最后一则日记，是她要告诉步她后尘人们的方法。她要说她做得到的，他们也有可能做到。其中的 those who 意思是凡是什么什么的人，可等于 those people who 或者是 people who， 其后搭配复数动词。此外 whoever 亦可以用来表示凡是什么什么的人，但后面搭配第三人称单数动词。例如 Those who want to lose weight should exercise more. 这句话可以写成 Whoever wants to lose weight should exercise more. 以上就是今天的课程，我们下次再会。
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope you've really learned quite a bit as we took you through this novel, Go Ask Alice. And we hope you remember some of the lessons, the cautionary tales in this book. You know, it might seem fun at the time to take some drugs and experiment, but ultimately it will put you off the track to success. So stay on the track and stay with your good friends who encourage you to do good things, smart things.
And taking drugs early in life might make you fat later in life. So remember that no one wants to be fat. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.